Hello, everyone. Let's continue on reading A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tillie Cole. But it brought me up short. So short that the humor draining out of me. Rune noticed the shift. His Adam's apple bobbed and he swallowed whatever he was going to say. Letting my heart rule my actions, I lifted my hand and dropped my palm to lie upon his face, making sure I had his undivided attention. I whispered, "It wouldn't take a bike to do that, Rune." "No?" he questioned, his voice husky. I shook my head. "Why?" he asked nervously. Redness blossomed on his cheeks. I could see what that question had cost his heavily fortified pride. I could see that Rune didn't ask anything more anymore. Closing the gap between us, I said in a hushed voice, "Because I'm pretty sure you never lost it." I waited. I waited with bated breath to see what he would do next. I wasn't expecting tender and soft. I wasn't expecting for my heart to sigh and my soul to melt. Rune, with the most careful of movements, moved forward and kissed me on my cheek, only inching back to drag his lips across mine. I held my breath in anticipation of a kiss on the lips, a real kiss, a kiss I yearned for. But instead, he bypassed my mouth for my other cheek, giving it to kiss my lips longed to gain. When Rune pulled away, my heart was beating like a drum, a loud bass in my chest. Rune sat back, but his hand, in my hand, had tightened a fraction. A secret smile took refuge behind my lips. A sound from over the creek pulled my attention. A duck taking flight into the dark sky. When I glanced at Rune, I saw he was watching it too. When he looked my way, I teased, "You're already a Viking. You don't need no bike." This time Rune smiled. The merest hint of teeth showed through. I beamed with pride. The server approached, carrying our crawfish, and placed the buckets on the paper-covered tables. Rune reluctantly released my hand, and we started ripping into the mountain of seafood. I closed my eyes when I tasted the meaty flesh on my tongue, a burst of lemon hitting my throat. I groaned at how good it was. Rune shook his head, laughing at me. I threw a broken bit of shell into his lap, and he scowled, wiping my hand on the napkin. I tipped my head back toward the night sky. The stars were bright in their cloudless blanket of black. "Have you ever seen anything so beautiful as this little creek?" I asked. Rune looked up, then out along the quiet creek, the reflection of blue stringed lights twinkling back at us. "I'd say yes," he answered in a matter-of-fact tone, then pointed to me. "But I get what you're saying. Even when I was back in Oslo, I would sometimes picture this place, wondering if you had been back." "No, this is the first time. Mama and Daddy aren't really big crawfish fans. It was always Mama." I smiled, picturing her sitting beside us at this table after sneaking us away. "Do you remember?" I laughed. She would bring her hip flask full of bourbon with her to slip into her sweet tea. I laughed harder. "Do you remember her putting her finger over her lips and saying, 'Now don't y'all be telling your folks about this. I had the good grace to bring y'all here, rescuing y'all from church, so no loose lips.'" Rune was smiling too, but his eyes were watching me laugh. "You miss her," he said. I nodded my head. "Every day. I wonder what other adventures we could have been on together. I often wonder if we would have gone to Italy to see Assisi, just like we talked about. I wonder if we would have gone to Spain, to run with the bulls." At that thought, I laughed again. A peace settled over me. Then I added, "But the best part of all this is I'll see her again soon." I met Rune's eyes. "When I return home." Like my mama had taught me, I never ever thought of what would happen to me as dying. The end. It was the beginning of something great. My soul would be returning home where it belonged. I hadn't realized I had upset Rune until he rose from his chair to walk along the small pier next to our table, the pier that led to the middle of the creek. The server came out. I watched Rune light a cigarette as he disappeared into the dark, only a cloud of smoke betraying where he stood. "Shall I clear up, ma'am?" the server inquired. I smiled and nodded. "Yes, please." I stood, and he looked puzzled, seeing Rune on the deck. "Can we have the check as well, please?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied. I walked out onto the deck to meet Rune, following the tiny speck of his lit cigarette. When I arrived at his side, he was leaning over the railing, staring absently at nothing. A soft crease was marring his forehead. His back was tense. It tensed even more when I stopped beside him. He took in a long drag of his cigarette and released it into the gentle breeze. "I can't deny what's happening to me, Rune," I said cautiously. He remained silent. "I can't live in a fantasy. I know what's coming. I know how this will go." Rune's breathing was ragged and his head dropped. When he lifted his eyes, he said brokenly, "It's not fair." My heart cried for his pain. I could see it racking his face, see it in the bunching of his muscles. Leaning forward on the railing, I inhaled the cool air. When Rune's breath had settled, I said, "It would have been really unfair had we not been gifted the next precious months." Rune's forehead fell slowly to rest upon his hands. "Don't you see a bigger picture for us both here, Rune? You came back to Blossom Grove only a few weeks after I had been sent home to live out the rest of my life, to enjoy the limited few months granted by medication." I looked at the stars again, feeling the presence of something greater smiling down on us. "For you it's unfair. I believe the opposite. We came back together for a reason. Perhaps it's a lesson we may struggle to learn until it's learned." I turned and pushed back the long hair covering his face. In the moonlight, underneath the glittering stars, I saw a tear tumble down his cheeks. I cleared it with a kiss. Rune turned into me, tucking his head into the crook of my neck. I wrapped my hand around his head, holding him close. Rune's back rose with a deep inhale. "I brought you here tonight to remind you of when we were happy, when we were inseparable, best friends and more. But..." He cut his words off. I gently pushed back his head to look at his face. "What?" I asked. "Please tell me. I promise I'm okay." He searched my eyes, then stared across the still water. When his gaze returned to me, he asked, "But what if this is the last time we ever get to do this?" Pushing myself between him and the railing, I took the cigarette from his hand and threw it into the creek. Standing on my tiptoes, I took both his cheeks in my hands. "Then we had tonight," I asserted. Rune's face winced at my words. "We've had this memory. We've had this cherished moment." My head tipped to the side and a nostalgic smile pulled on my lips. I used to know a boy I loved with my whole heart, who lived for a single moment, who told me that a single moment could change the world. It could change someone's life. That one moment could make someone's life, in that brief second, infinitely better or infinitely worse. He closed his eyes, but I continued to speak. Tonight, being at this creek with you again," I said, feeling a sense of peace fill my soul. "Remembering my mama and why I love her so much, it has made my life infinitely better. This moment, given to me by you, I will remember always. I will take it with me to wherever I go." Rune's eyes opened. I pulled him down further. "You gave me tonight. You returned. We can't change the facts. We can't change our fates. But we can still live. We can live as hard and as fast as we can while we have these days before us. We can be us again, Poppy and Rune." I didn't think he would say anything in return, so it surprised me and filled me with incredible hope when he said, "Our final adventure." The perfect way to phrase it, I thought. "Our final adventure," I whispered into the night, an unprecedented joy infusing my body. Rune's arms snaked around my waist. "With one amendment," I said. Rune frowned. Smoothing the crease on his forehead, I said, "This life's final adventure, because I know with unwavering faith that we'll be together again. Even when this adventure is over, a greater one awaits us on the other side. And Rune, there would be no heaven if you weren't back in my arms someday." All 6'4" of Rune Christiansen braced against me, and I held him. I held him until he calmed. When he pulled back, I asked, "So Rune Christiansen, Viking from Norway, are you with me?" Despite himself, Rune laughed when I held out my hand for him to shake. Rune, my Scandinavian bad boy with a face made by the angels, slipped his hand into mine and we shook on our promise, twice, like my mama taught me. "I'm with you," he said. I felt his vow all the way to my toes. "Ma'am, sir?" I looked over Rune's shoulder to see the server holding our check. "We're closing up," he explained. "You okay?" I asked Rune, signaling to the server that we were coming. Rune nodded, his heavy brows pushing his face back into his familiar scowl. I imitated how he looked by scrunching my face. Rune, unable to resist, gave me his good-humored smirk. "Only you," he said, more to himself than to me. "Poppyman." Slipping his hand back into mine, he slowly guided me to the front of the shack. When we were back in the car, Rune turned on the engine and said, "We have one more place to go." Another memorable moment. As we pulled out onto the road, Rune took my hand in his across the console and replied, "I hope so, Poppyman. I hope so." It took us a while to drive back to town. We didn't talk much. I had come to understand that Rune was quieter than he used to be. Not that he was exactly an extrovert before. He was always introverted and quiet. He fit nicely the image of the brooding artist. Head always juggling places and landscapes he wanted to capture on film. Moments. We had traveled only a mile or so down the road when Rune turned the radio on. He told me to pick any station I wanted, and when I quietly sang, his fingers tightened just that bit more in mine. A yawn escaped my mouth as we approached the edge of town, but I fought to keep my eyes open. I wanted to know where he was taking me. When we stopped outside the Dixon Theater, my pulse took flight. This was the theater I had always dreamed of performing at. It was the theater I had always wanted to return to when I was older, a part of a professional orchestra, to my hometown. Rune cut the engine, and I stared up at the impressive stone theater. "Rune, what are we doing here?" Rune released my hand and opened his door. "Come with me." Frowning, but my heart racing so impossibly hard, I opened my door to follow him. Rune took my hand and led me to the front entrance. It was late on a Sunday night, but he led us straight through the front doors. As soon as we entered the dim foyer, I heard the faint sound of Puccini playing in the background. My hand tightened in Rune's. He glanced down at me, a smirk on his lips. "Rune," I whispered, as he led me up the opulent staircase. "Where are we going?" Rune pressed his fingers over my lips, signaling for me to be quiet. I wondered why, but then he led me to a door, the door that led to the dress circle of the theater. Rune opened the door and music washed over me like a wave. Gasping at the sheer volume of the sound, I followed Rune to the front row of seats. Down below was an orchestra, their conductor leading them. I recognized them instantly. The Savannah Chamber Orchestra. I was transfixed, staring at the musicians focusing so intently on their instruments, swaying in time to the beat. Whipping my head to Rune, I asked, "How did you do this?" Rune shrugged. "I was looking to take you to see them perform properly, but they're traveling overseas tomorrow." When I explained to the conductor how much you loved him, he said we could drop in on their rehearsal. No words passed through my lips. I was speechless, completely and utterly speechless. Failing to adequately express my feelings, my sheer gratitude for this surprise, I laid my head on his shoulder and cuddled into his arm. The smell of leather filled my nose as my eyes focused on the orchestra below. I watched in fascination. I watched as the conductor expertly guided the musicians through their rehearsals, the solos, the decorative passages, the intricate harmonies. Rune held me close as I sat, mesmerized. Occasionally I felt his eyes on me, him watching me watching them. But I couldn't tear my eyes away, especially from the cello section. When the deep tones rang clear and true, I let my eyes drift to a close. It was beautiful. I could picture myself so clearly, sitting amongst fellow musicians, my friends, staring into this theater, full of the people I knew and I loved. Rune sitting, watching with his camera around his neck. It was the most perfect of dreams. It had been my biggest dream for as long as I could remember. The conductor called for the musicians to quiet. I watched the stage. I watched as all but the principal cellists lowered their instruments. The woman, who looked to be in her 30s, pulled her chair to the center stage. No audience, bar us. She positioned herself, her bow poised on the string, to start. She concentrated on the conductor. As he raised his baton, instructing her to begin, I heard the first note play, and as I did, I became completely still. I didn't dare breathe. I didn't want to hear anything but the most perfect melody ever in existence. The sound of the swan from Carnival of the Animals drifted up to our seats. I watched the cellist become lost in the music, her facial expressions betraying her emotions with each new note. I wanted to be her. In that moment, I wanted to be the cellist playing this piece so perfectly. I wanted to be gifted that trust, the trust of giving this performance. Everything faded away as I watched her. Then I closed my eyes and let the music take hold of my senses. I let it take me on its journey. As the tempo picked up, the vibrato, echoing beautifully off the theater walls, I opened my eyes. And the tears came. The tears came as the music demanded. Rune's hand tightened in mine, and I felt his gaze on me. I could sense he was worried, that I was upset. But I wasn't upset. I was soaring, heart soaring, in the blissful melody. My cheeks grew wet, but I let the tears flow. This was why music was my passion. From wood and string and bow, this magical melody could be created, stirring life into a soul. And I stayed that way. I stayed that way until the last note drifted to the ceiling. The cellist raised her bow. Only then did she open her eyes, guiding her spirit to its resting place inside her, because that's what she was feeling. I knew. The music had transported her to a distant place, somewhere only she knew. It had moved her. For a time, the music had graced her with its power. The conductor nodded, and the orchestra walked backstage, leaving silence to occupy the now empty stage. But I didn't turn my head. Not until Rune sat forward, with a hand placed gently upon my back. "Poppyman?" he whispered, his voice guarded and unsure. "I'm sorry," he said under his breath. "I thought this would make you happy." I faced him, clasping both his hands between mine. "No," I said, interrupting his apology. "No," I reiterated. "These are tears of joy, Rune, absolute joy." He exhaled, releasing one of his hands to wipe at my cheeks. I laughed, my voice echoing around us. I cleared my throat, chasing away an excess of emotion, and explained, "That's my favorite piece, Rune. The Swan, from the Carnival of the Animals. The principal cellist, she just played my favorite piece, beautifully, perfectly." I took a deep breath. It's the piece I was planning to play when I auditioned for Juilliard. It's always been the piece I pictured myself playing at Carnegie Hall. I know it inside out. I know every note, every shift in tempo, every crescendo, everything. I sniffed and wiped my eyes. "Hearing it tonight," I said, squeezing his hand, "sitting next to you. It was a dream come true." Rune, too lost for words, placed his arm around my shoulders and pulled me close. I felt his kiss on my head. Promise, Rune, I said. Promise me that when you're in New York, when you're studying at Tisch, you'll go and see the New York Philharmonic play. Philharmonic play. Promise me you'll watch the principal cellist play this piece. And promise me that when you do, you'll think of me. Imagine me playing up on that stage, fulfilling my dream. I breathed deeply, content with that picture. Because that would be enough for me now, I explained. Simply knowing that I at least get to live out that dream, even if it's only in your mind's eye. Papi, Rune said painfully. Please, baby. My heart leapt as he called me baby. It sounded as perfect as music to my ears. Raising my head, I lifted his chin with my finger and insisted, Promise me, Rune. He turned his gaze away from me. Papi, if you're not going to be in New York with me, why the hell would I ever go? Because of your photography. Because like this dream was mine, yours was to study photography at NYU. Concern cut through me when Rune's jaw clenched. Rune? I questioned. After a long moment, he turned slowly back to face me. I searched his beautiful face. I slumped back in my seat at what I saw in his expression. Refusal. Why don't you take pictures anymore, Rune? I asked. Rune looked away. Please don't ignore me. Rune sighed in defeat. Because without you, I didn't see the world the same way anymore. Nothing was the same. I know we were only young, but without you, nothing made sense. I was angry. I was drowning. So I gave up my passion because the passion within me had died out. Out of anything he could have done or said, this saddened me most of all because the passion had been so strong within him. And his pictures, even at 15, were like nothing I'd ever seen. I stared at Rune's hard features, his eyes lost in a trance as he stared blankly at the empty stage. His wall was back up, and the tension in his jaw was back. His soul and expression had returned. Needing to leave him be, not to push him too far, I leaned my head back against his shoulder and smiled. I smiled, still hearing that piece drift into my ears. Thank you, I whispered, as the lights on the stage faded. Lifting my head, I waited for Rune to look at me. Eventually he did. Only you could have known that this, I gestured to the auditorium, would mean so much to me. Only my Rune. Rune pressed a soft kiss on my cheek. It was you at my recital the other night, wasn't it? Rune sighed, then eventually nodded his head. I was never going to miss you play, Papiman. I never will. He got to his feet. He was silent as he held out his hand. He was silent as I gave him my hand and he led us to the car. He was silent as we journeyed home. I thought I must have hurt him somehow. I worried that I had done something wrong. When we arrived home, Rune left the car and walked around the hood to open my door. I took his proffered hand as I jumped down. I kept tight hold as Rune walked me back to my house. I expected to go to the door. Instead, he led me to my window. I frowned when I saw the frustrated look on his face. Needing to know what was wrong, I ran my hand down his face, but as my finger landed on his cheek, something in him seemed to snap. He backed me against the side of my house. His body pressed against mine, and he cupped my face with his hands. I was breathless at his closeness, breathless at the intensity in his dark expression. His blue eyes searched every part of my face. I wanted to do this right, he said. I wanted to take this slow, this date, us, tonight. He shook his head, his forehead creasing as he fought whatever he was battling inside. But I can't. I won't. I opened my mouth to answer, but his thumb drifted to graze my bottom lip, his attention on my mouth. You are my Papiman. You know me, only you know me. Taking my hand, he laid it over his heart. You know me, even under this anger, you know me. He sighed, edging so close that we shared the same air. And I know you, Rune paled. And if we only have limited time, I'm not going to waste it. You're mine, I'm yours, to hell with anything else. My heart fluttered like an arpeggio in my chest. Rune was all I managed to say. I wanted to shout that yes, I was his, that he was mine. Nothing else mattered, but my voice failed me. I was too overcome with emotion. Say it, Papiman, he demanded. Just say yes. Rune took a final step, trapping me, his body flushed with my own, his heart beating in tandem with mine. I dragged in a breath. Rune's lips brushed against mine, hovering, waiting, primed to possess them completely. As I looked into Rune's eyes, his black pupils all but eliminating the blue, I let go and whispered, yes. Warm lips suddenly crashed to mine, Rune's familiar mouth taking them with a single-minded determination. His warmth and minty taste drowned out my senses. His hard chest kept me pinned to the wall, trapped. As he owned me with his kiss, Rune was showing me to whom I belonged. He was giving me no other choice but to submit to him, to give myself back to him after withdrawing for too many years. Rune's hand threaded through my hair, keeping me in place. I moaned at his tongue pushing through to meet mine, soft, hot, and desperate. Lifting my hands up his wide back, they landed in his hair. Rune growled into my mouth, kissing me deeper, taking me further and further from any fear or trepidation I harbored at his return. He kissed me until there was no part of me that didn't know who it belonged to. He kissed me until my heart again fused with his, two halves of one whole. My body began to weaken under his touch, feeling me completely surrender to him. Rune's kiss slowed to a soft, gentle caress. Then he broke away, our breathing heavy, an arc of tension above us. Rune's swollen lips kissed my cheeks, my jaw, and my neck. When he finally withdrew, his quick breaths blew against my face. His hands slackened their grip on me, and he waited. He waited, watching me with his intense gaze. Then my lips parted, and I whispered, Kiss 357, against the wall of my house. When Rune took possession of my heart, Rune stilled his hand and I finished with, and my heart almost burst. Then it came, Rune's pure smile. It was bright, it was wide, and it was true. My heart soared at the sight. Papiman, he whispered. Gripping his shirt, I whispered back, my Rune. Rune's eyes closed as I spoke those words, a soft sigh falling from his mouth. His hands gradually loosened their grip on my hair, and he took a reluctant step back. I'd better go in, I whispered. Yeah, he answered back. But he didn't look away. Instead, he pressed against me, taking my mouth quickly and softly before pulling back. Then he stepped back several spaces, putting a good distance between us. I lifted my fingers to my lips and said, If you keep kissing me like this, I'll fill my jar in no time at all. Rune turned away to walk to his house, but stopped to glance over his shoulder. That's the idea, baby. 1,000 kisses from me. Rune rushed back to his house, leaving me to watch him go, leaving me with a dizzying lightness flowing through me like a rapid. When my feet finally moved, I walked into my house and straight to my room. I pulled out the jar from under my bed and wiped off the dust. Opening the jar, I took the pen from my nightstand and wrote down tonight's kiss. An hour later, I was lying in bed when I heard the window opening. Sitting up, I saw my curtain be pushed aside. My heart leapt into my mouth when Rune stepped in. I smiled as he walked forward, shucking off his shirt and throwing it on the floor. My eyes widened when I drank in the sight of his bare chest. Then my heart almost exploded when he raked his hand through his hair, pushing it from his face. Rune walked slowly to my bed, standing to wait by his side. Shuffling back, I lifted the cover and Rune climbed in, immediately wrapping his arms around my waist. As my back nestled perfectly against his front, I sighed in contentment. I closed my eyes. Rune pressed a kiss just below my ear and whispered, Sleep, baby, I got you. And he did. He had me, just like I had him. That'll be it for today, but I'll be continuing on in the next video, so I hope to see you then.